Good morning, lunatics. Welcome to Morning Java. Morning Java brought to you, as always, Dan, by our good friends at the Get-Go Cafe and Market, where I'm pretty sure Christian Yelich would be really into the smokestack.
So does Yachty.
Yachty likes, I imagine Yachty is a 16-hour smoked meat kind of guy.
Yeah, he is.
Do you think Yachty would be a fan of the St. Louis Blues winning the Stanley Cup?
I would think that everybody in St. Louis is just overjoyed. I mean, I was there, whatever that was, 2-3 weeks ago, covering the Pirates, and it was right before the final. Everything is decked out, and there were people, with "Go Blues," "Let's Go Blues," and everything. Every business, everything is in a very St. Louis-y kind of way. At Busch Stadium, which is almost always 100% red, you saw a lot of blue coming in, people with Tarasenko jerseys and everything. And the Cardinals themselves did get behind it, with the stadium being filled, Busch Stadium being filled with people. Adam Wainwright and a lot of the other players really got behind it. It's just a good thing for hockey, isn't it? More than anything else.
It really is. And I was trying to think about this. When's the last time you saw two first-time Stanley Cup winners go back-to-back? This has been an era so littered with the Blackhawks, the Penguins, the Kings. I mean, we're talking about two teams winning their first Stanley Cups in back-to-back years.
I hadn't even thought of that, but that's true.
It's nice, right?
I think it's good for hockey whenever you have a market that's been good for the sport. And Washington's been that in its own way. Okay, the Capitals kind of had their own little world out when they were out in Landover, Maryland, but they still drew. When they went downtown, they were still a success with Ovechkin and everything else, but they hadn't won it all. St. Louis, though, 52 years of doing nothing other than packing their building.
Yeah, and it's a place that's had legitimate superstars playing there. You're talking about Wayne Gretzky, Brett Hall. I mean,
Gretzky's not a St. Louis Blue. Take it back.
Come on, though. He played there. I mean, it's a team that expected
Hall
to
of
win
Famers. Bernie Federko's a Hall of Famer. They had guys that were great hockey players, perennial playoff team. That's the part that drove you nuts about the Blues never winning. It was this it's not like they stunk all this time. They were actually very good.
No, the worst part has always been their jerseys, the splashes of red, and I hate the one that they wear right now. But man, I love to see them win.
I think they look pretty good. The blue note.
Get rid of I love the note. Get rid of that drop shadow dark piping around everything.
The Blues
on the
are
jersey.
Dressed very well. Don't listen to him. The St. Louis lad himself, Patrick Maroon, guys get giddy after winning the Cup, and you and I have experienced
they say
that.
Things they shouldn't.
Sometimes they go on Java, right there on the ice. Ian Cole, of course, doing that with us in Nashville. But they get really wound up, and sometimes though they just blurt the truth. And Maroon said, "Big physical hockey is back. I don't want to hear, I don't want to hear about speed and skill anymore." Now he's going over the top here, but are there teams that are going to look at St. Louis and say, should we at least add some element of that to our forecheck, to our defending?
I think they probably have to. People in Pittsburgh really hated everything about that interaction between Bortuzzo and Evgeny Malkin.
Well, they should have. It was garbage.
They should have. But in our comments, when Bortuzzo was hacking the legs out of everybody in front of the net in the Stanley Cup Finals, everybody's saying the Penguins need a defenseman like Bortuzzo. Where's a guy like that? I think there is a spot for it, but especially up front, because a guy like Maroon, who's a guy that I sat in a room right next to here with this guy and said that the Penguins should go after 2 years ago in free agency. Man, he's so.
He was in Edmonton at the time. It's like visiting the graveyard. I mean, all he did, you just go there to have your career die. The most talented player in the world right now is in Edmonton watching his career die. So Maroon did that too, so I didn't want him.
I love watching a guy like that play. I love watching the big physical wingers who get in front of the net. Ryan Malone's like one of my favorite players in Penguins history, probably. He's not a perfect player by any means. He wasn't ever. But I love watching guys like that play.
I think you're going to see teams do more along the lines of what Jim Rutherford did with the Eric Goodbranson acquisition. There was an immediate reaction to that was, of course, overwhelmingly bad, especially from the analytics community. But then Goodbranson comes in and plays way beyond what anybody had expected. And the Penguins became a little bit more emboldened, if you will. Not because of fighting and dropping the gloves or whatever, but just they weren't as soft or as wimpy. And then whenever they defended harder. when they were on the forecheck, not because of Goodbranson, but just because of other variables, because they got a little bit bigger with the acquisition of Nick Bjugstad and getting rid of Broussard, right?
Yeah, I mean, it helps.
But they became a harder team to play against, to borrow from the vernacular. And I think that's going to matter. I do think you're going to see more teams pay attention to what St. Louis did.
Yeah, I think it does matter, but the one thing is...
And Boston, by the way. I don't mean to leave them out. Boston, a very similar team,
no,
not
yeah,
as big.
they play tough, they play fast, but they play extraordinarily tough for their size. But, the Goodbranson deal, he was excellent for the Penguins down the stretch, but I didn't see any of that snarl that when you and I sat here when he was acquired, we said, this guy, he's going to be the grit when it's needed. And I watched Malkin get injured, and then I watched other guys get beat up, and, he'd grab somebody's jersey, but he did that look at the ref, like he's
But that's
he's
all
restraining.
he's got to do, man. You
know,
saw
but-
that. You saw those guys turtle. We're talking about physical play here, not fighting here. You're getting into enforcing.
No, I'm
this
all of
is-
it. Bang some bodies. The one time he tried to step up, he whiffed, and that's what I remember about his physicality.
Jordan Binnington or Ryan O'Reilly for Conn Smythe? Not that we don't. I mean, it was O'Reilly, obviously.
Okay, so I love beards, but I also love goalies. So those, that's how I weigh this. Listen, Binnington was so good in the first period of Game 7. I know that he had issues throughout the series. I know that it went a couple of games longer than it could have, but the guy, he stole moments from that game in Boston at the Garden against a team that plays hard, they play fast, and they score a lot of goals. I liked leaning towards him, but I mean, O'Reilly, all playoffs, he was good. He was great. He did things nobody's ever done before. And I mean, he was really good.
I go to looking at Game 7 versus the body of work. The Conn Smythe Trophy, as it's listed, is the player judged to be most valuable to his team over the course of the playoffs. And now, we've covered, obviously, Stanley Cup championships of late, and I've been part of this voting process, and I know that there's an undue tendency to just vote with your eyeballs, which is just whatever's happening right in front of you, which is where I remember in San Jose that there was discussion, well, it should be Chris Letang because Letang was playing the greatest game we'd ever seen by a defenseman. You can't do it. Ryan O'Reilly was that through the whole run of St. Louis's championship. Other than he had a rib injury either in the Winnipeg or the Dallas portion of their run, but beyond that, what he was able to do in the final, dude, I mean, he was superhuman at both ends of the rink. We're talking about a Selke finalist who put up goals in 4 consecutive games in the final. And then he scores the goal in Game 7. I mean, with all due respect to what happened late in the first period with Alex Pietrangelo, it was still O'Reilly that got that done. To me, I thought this one was a no-brainer because Binnington wasn't that good in the final.
Yeah, no, but he did have that. It's that Game 7. You feel it's the one-game playoff. It has all of that appeal to it.
But that's not what the award says.
No, I know. I fully understand that's not what the award says, but the award also says best defenseman for the Norris, and well, we could talk for an hour on how it hasn't been that.
No, it ends up being whoever got the most points or whatever,
exactly.
right?
I mean, I just, you look back to January when the team was in the basement, the coaching change, and Binnington comes in, and I know that's not the playoffs, but really for St. Louis, that was the start of the playoffs.
He can be their team MVP, but their playoff MVP, without a question, was Ryan O'Reilly, who now, by the way, has to be in the conversation at least when you start talking about real stars, like two-way stars, 200-foot stars in the game.